It's really just communicating what you want and what you don't want to happen. Boss Bitch After Dark. Okay, you guys, welcome to Boss Bitch After Dark. I know you guys have been requesting, you've been wanting some more of the good, the stuff that I'm not really talking about in depth on social medias. And a lot of you are very, very curious, and I appreciate your support over on Instagram, sharing with me in the studio and being very vulnerable and letting me know that you enjoy it, you love hearing it. You still you still think I'm a good person. Give me those words of affirmation. If you're newish to the boss bitch world, you might want to start with some of the other After Dark episodes. Just know that they're more explicit in nature. I'm sharing a lot of like my personal sexual stories, dating stories, relationship things that I'm learning that are not super fitness related, because I think they're also is a lot to be gleaned from some of the lessons that I'm learning and experiences for women who may be curious and don't know where to start or talk to, or have, like kind of like a girlfriend's perspective is really what I try to bring. I don't claim to be any kind of expert. I don't even claim to be an expert in the health and fitness realm. Let me just be honest about that. I think there's always something to be learned and, improved upon and educated. So I never claim to be, I'm a be all, know all be all about all the things. So when it comes to these things, especially now, I'm still learning and fumbling through this myself. But my hope is that by listening to this, you will learn something that maybe you didn't know before, and it maybe causes some curiosity for you to do some research for your own interests and desires and want to explore some things. And the other thing is even if you're really more of like just one of my fitness fans, my fitness competition, diet fans and things like that, there are a lot of things I'm going to be talking about today that are relative to even monogamous relationships. So if you're like, she's crazy, that bitch fucking lost all her marbles, I will never do that, and you identify as being monogamous, there's still a lot in here that is super beneficial for people who are monogamous and, have no desire to be open, poly, or non-monogamous. Okay, so that's my spiel. Now, why does this matter? With this whole topic of non-monogamy today, I'm going to be going over a lot of things, but mainly I have like 5 key things for you to get started with non-monogamy. And this is just based off of things that I've been learning over the past year, reading and studying and really diving deep into personally is what I want to share. But the reason why this is a thing for me, it's a thing. It's a definitely how I plan on navigating myself in romantic relationships for the rest of my life. Can't say for certain, nothing's ever certain, but I'm pretty damn sure. Okay. For those of you that haven't dove into my beginning podcast, which if you do, I don't want to know because they're probably super cringy, but I do share my experiences as far as my marriage goes. And I went into that very, very extensively in previous podcasts. But I have been historically, most of my adult life, I would attribute to being monogamous. I was married for 10 years. I've had 3 children. All of my relationships have been serious monogamous relationships. As an adult, they've definitely been, one-on-one monogamous. And there's always been issues in my experience with fidelity, myself being the offender and also my partners being the offenders. And that's always seemed to be a reoccurring theme in my relationships. I know what some of that attributed to from my partners because we've had discussions and things like that. But for myself, speaking for myself personally, something that I realized was I would be in love with somebody and we would be, obviously the default is monogamous, right? You start dating or exclusive, you go down that whole path or the relationship escalator, as they call it in a lot of these relationship books. And you start to notice things that maybe you're not, that don't fulfill you in the relationship, where you know, like, okay, that thing could potentially bother me down the road, but like he's a great guy, he's got a million other great qualities, like we'll let it slide. That's how we tend to, find who our people are in our person. And then as a relationship progresses, and this is again my experience, that sometimes there's a mismatch of sexual desire and intimacy, time spent together, lots of little intricacies, and not to mention, at some point you realize when you are with this person for an extended period of time that maybe sometimes you're tired of fucking this person. Okay. That I was trying to come up with a fancy way and like kind of beat around the bush to like say that, but that's the hard and fast truth. Like you can't be expected to be put in a situation where there are other people, other humans of the opposite sex or the same sex, if that's also your interest, and not have some kind of physical attraction or chemistry, and think about potentially exploring that, right? Like that comes up. I find that that's a common theme. I've worked with women for 16 years at this point, and I'd be hard pressed to find a woman. I can think of a couple off the top of my head in this many years that I've bonded with, training in person, that are like head over heels in love with their husband, have no desire to be with anyone else. It's usually not the case. And I think that that's normal. And so part of my self discovery, like after my divorce, was I don't feel to the depths of my soul that we should rely on one person to help fulfill all the needs. I don't think that that's realistic for one person to be held to that standard. And in tandem with that, I have found myself in multiple situations in my adult life, in relationships, and where I was being infidelitous, that I very much indeed loved two people at the same time. And it was a highly conflicting feeling when you're like, how the fuck am I married and I love this man and this and this and that? We've gone through all these things together. And then I have this affair and I love that man too, right? It's not widely accepted in our society, but it was my truth. And that's all I knew. It was like, that was my truth. And it just felt very, very unfair. It's like if you were like, well, I can't have more than one kid because I only have enough love for one. It's just not possible for two. That's not right. That's weird. I can only love one more than the other. So that's how my brain wraps around how non-monogamy is not for me. So for me, I'm kind of like, I've been doing it, but I'm like coming out about it, I guess, if you will. And as I'm going through this reinvention, right, which we talked about that on a couple episodes back, and it was on purpose because I'm feeling very passionate about this, and I don't want other people to feel like they have to be embarrassed about their choices or their sexual orientation or their preferences, because life's too fucking short, and love who you want to love as many people as you want to fucking love. And who the fuck's business is it anyways? Right. So I'm just being brave over here. So as I'm going through this, like talking about it on a very public platform, right? Like we have a good amount of podcast listeners, So it's sharing very openly with all of you, even though I'm recording here in this room by myself, and I feel like nobody's going to really know after I upload this, but y'all come and knocking on my DMs, and I love you for that. But I want to share the experience with you because it's going to be. So I talk with John Romanello every 2 weeks, and I talked about him in previous episodes, and I'll also mention him later on. But I told him I feel like I'm in a bumper car, and I'm just like, oh fuck, whoops, I shouldn't have hit that one. That one I hit a little too hard, right? And I'm kind of like bumping around. I'm like a newborn baby with like trying to navigate and tell partners that I'm meeting with, and play partners and potential boyfriends, and so it's a process. And part of that is sharing this with you and learning together. So, with being married, both of us being infidelitous, I've also been divorced for 10 years. I've had a few serious relationships before where they've been monogamous, and they're over a year and a half. I on and off again relationship for a few years. And I know that, again, through those relationships, there were always periods of like unhappiness, unrest, agitation, with knowing that I didn't feel like this was my person 100%. And I loved a lot of their qualities, but I also wanted to explore other options. And it sort of felt stifling in my experience. So, with that, knowing, like, just feeling there was always something missing or lacking. And let me just tell you, I am not perfect either. Okay. So it wasn't like I'm coming to the table like some majestical unicorn. Like, it would have been advantageous for them to also explore other relationships, or us just having a non-monogamous relationship with us having each other as home base, because I have my as well my own faults. Okay. There was always this guilt that came with that that experience for me, like having an attraction or desire for someone else, either physically, mentally, emotionally. I would always have this guilt around it. And I just knew, as I've been traveling through this, being single, not in a serious monogamous relationship, that I just didn't want to do that anymore. So for the past year, I've been dating casually. And what I mean by casually, by my definition, is friends with benefits type of situations, or casual hookups, or lovers that we knew weren't going to go anywhere other than just sexual, and like we'd have intimate conversations and things like that. So I've had plenty of those experiences over the last year, but they were very much to the point where there was nobody that the intimacy was growing so deep that we were sharing conversations about other relationships, or like, hey, are you seeing anyone else? Are you just seeing me? It was very much an understood, unspoken, like, we're just hooking up. It's fun. And like, don't ask, don't tell. We would have conversations around sexual health. And we would also, with some of my partners, exchange our lab results. And at first, I remember somebody asking for that for me, and this is just like a side note, and I was like, "Ugh, the audacity!" Right? This was a couple years back, but I've come to find that that's a great default, and it works for me, and I prefer to lead with that, just in full transparency, so people know, like, I take my sexual health very seriously, and it's important for me, and I get my my labs done. If we're planning on hooking up this weekend, I prefer that we don't hook up with any new partners, and we have our labs done at least a week before. And that sounds like super technical and like it would kill the vibe, but we're all fucking adults here. And like, I'm not trying to get some Gombu virus that I cannot fuck anymore with. Okay. So it's important for me to make sure that things are safe. So this has been my last year of dating, right? My last, probably, if I'm being honest, like 2 years. So it's been very carefree, very like no serious partners that were looking to be in a monogamous or very committed relationship. Well, that all changed because there have been periods of time where, I know, shocker, boss bitch like wants to cuddle. but but no, but seriously, I'm looking for a more intimate connection with somebody. Like, hookups and friends with benefit things. Those things are all great and fine, and they're fun, and I enjoy them. And I'm a very self-driven, motivated person, and that I don't need a lot of attention from a partner. Like, I'm like a cactus. You just give me dick. Well, more than once a week, but you just like pet me, tell me I'm pretty, smack me on my ass. I'm like, I don't really need you blowing up my phone. I don't need you breathing on me every minute of the day. Like, hey, do you and I do me. Like, I want you to do you. Okay. It's very hard. It's been very hard for me to connect with somebody on that level and build that level of intimacy. So I've just been having fun and not taking these relationships or situationships, hookups seriously. Do you guys like my stories? I hope you like my stories. So I went to a swingers party and that changed everything for me. Okay. Changed everything. So the swingers party, I believe I've alluded to it on, I don't know, probably some of the other After Dark episodes, but it was a hotel takeover. And what that means is the entire hotel was taken over for, I believe it was 3 days. And everybody that was at the hotel was a part of this swingers event. Now, mind you, I was terrified. I went with a friend and we were both terrified because we didn't know what the fuck we were getting ourselves into, right? Because and again, being honest with you guys, to this point at this party, had never been in a threesome. I've never been in a group sex experience. I've never had sex in public. So here we are at this fucking swingers party. Let's fucking go, bitches. And I'm just like, okay, well, worst case, best case, we're just gonna like watch. That was our thing. Like, we're just gonna like spectate. Okay. And for me, if I left that whole weekend and just with the experience and like seeing all the things going on, would have been enough for me to be like, great time, like enjoyed myself, maybe not for me all the time, but cool group of people. The second that my heel hit the inside the hotel, like corridor, for the first event of the weekend, I looked around at the people around me and all I saw were the most pleasant, happy, body free, all shapes, all sizes, all ages, half naked, fully dressed, full suits, butt plugs, pasties, nude with a collar, like an eclectic array of amazing things that I have never experienced in my entire life. And I felt for the very first time at home. And I don't know, like it makes me emotional. And I know that sounds absolutely batshit crazy, but I forever have felt like there's just something that I'm not clicking with just in my like social sphere and like, friend groups. And I just felt like I've always just been different. And I've felt that since high school, and I know that that's likely a me thing. And I'm, going to work through that in therapy. But it was the first time I just felt like I was just with like-minded people and people who I felt would understand me and I could relate to, and I could watch in their own experiences and not have judgment towards them and appreciate that they were likely doing the same for me. I'm just a very physical, sexual, like sensual person. And I blame the pole dancing. Like it tapped into like a part of my femininity that I never want to relinquish. And stepping back into dating and, kind of like hooking up with guys and being more confident and assertive and asking for what I want and going to these like swingers parties and sex parties and play parties has allowed me to really step into my feminine and just embrace it and have that piece of me that I miss so very much from the sensual dance part of my life. So that was just the beginning of my metamorphosis to where I feel like I've come leaps and bounds from since, just from a psychological perspective, deprogramming old monogamy conditioning that doesn't work for me, so many things. But the swingers party was the gateway drug, okay, if you will. It was a fantastic time. We met some amazing people. And I think there's a lot of assumptions with things like swingers parties and sex parties and things like that. And I plan on doing a full episode to dive really deep into that. I've been to a handful myself. I have a handful more planned for the year. So I just want to come with a really good podcast of just different experiences to share with you guys. But this first event was life-changing. And like I said, met great people, had great experiences, was embraced with open arms, and not because everybody wanted to fuck me. So anyhow, it was a great time. So my first tip, I know this was like a very extended intro into like my brain and where I'm at. So if you're still here, you're great. Thanks for hanging on. But the first tip is when you are trying to get started with non-monogamy, okay, do your research. And this is essentially what I've been doing for quite some time, just under the radar, because I wasn't ready to just start talking about that shit on Instagram. And like my besties all have known, and they have all just been like, you're never going to settle down with somebody because you're having way too much fun. And it's less about that. I am interested in a committed relationship. And I know that sounds really strange, but we're going to talk about that. Okay. So I started diving into more open relationship poly style topics back when John Romanello started posting heavily on his Instagram Q&As about his experiences and things of that nature. And I've followed him for years, but I followed him previously because of like fitness related stuff. I'd seen him speak at a few different conferences where I had, business coaches and things. And then I started following his wife, who has an incredible following as well. And I just wanted to I was just standing outside the fishbowl and I was so curious, like, how the fuck is this a thing? Like, this is amazing. I just don't think I could ever do it, right? Like, I'd be too jealous, but yeah, I'd want to have sex with everybody. Like, all these things were running through my head. So, before I obviously started practicing it, I just started reading and researching and diving into all the things. Now, it's important that you educate yourself. And let me be the example for you, okay? It'll help you avoid very shitty situationships, okay? So I've had a recent situationship in which I didn't cover some of these things we're going to talk about today. And I was afraid to let this new person I started playing with know that, listen, I know for certain that I am like non-monogamous. We had a couple dates and I just forgot to bring that up on purpose because he was fine, y'all. And I was like, I need to get in this boy's pants. And then I need to just be like, oh, by the way, and he'll be fine with it. Like, what guy doesn't want to date a girl that wants to let him also have sex with other people? Well, let me tell you, that didn't work out in my favor. Okay. And I learned a lot from that situationship. He's a wonderful man. I've spent 5-ish months spending a lot of time naked with him. And obviously, when you spend a lot of time naked with somebody for that many months, you develop care for that person, right? So from that, I could have saved myself a lot of headache and heartache and just disappointment had I had the conversation with him early on and then allow him to decide, and myself, quite honestly, to decide if that's what we wanted to proceed with. And if we did, we knew how to proceed from there, right? Like, okay, he wanted monogamy. I did not. So had we had the conversation earlier, in my head, it would have been easier to set boundaries around certain things and decide like, okay, well, we're only going to spend this much time together versus 5 days a week, stuff like that, that started to trend more towards relationshipy type of time together. And had I just done some of these things I'm going to talk about today, I would have avoided that situationship like that. Now, also handling challenging conversations. So when you do your research, you know how to navigate hard talks. I'm getting so much better at this. Okay. I chose the expedited version of learning how to do this, which is AKA hire John Romanello to give you the fucking jet pack to the moon to get shit done. And it's getting shit done. Right. So John's great because he's my coach and he will hold me accountable. He'll be like, all right, next time when we talk, I want you to have taken care of this conversation, that conversation, this conversation. We talked today about how that looks for you based on how you feel and go. And so then I just feel compelled to get shit done because I like a to-do list. So the other piece of that is part of doing your research and getting very familiar with this conversation around non-monogamy will better equip you to feel like when somebody comes across your path that might be a potential, open relationship type of partner and they're not interested, that you can't take that as rejection. That was a really hard one for me. It was I was like making it about me. And it's less about that. And you need to think of it more as like, you just have mismatched desires, right? Like as if, like I've had somebody who I was really into wanted children. And I'm like, fuck that. I've already done that. I'm done. Fucking kitchen's closed, buddy. And that was just mismatched desires. So you have to think of it as that. If you meet somebody, they're monogamous, you're not, you don't want to force somebody in to try to change them into that. And the other way around, like a monogamous person shouldn't try to be like, you're doing that wrong. And like, and I've been made to feel that way with some previous partners. And I'm not going to be for that. I'm not standing for that anymore. So I'm going to share with you some resources for you to dive in because, I'm not the pro, but I learned from the pros. And so I want to share that with you in what I have found to be the most helpful, some things that I haven't read yet, but have come highly recommended by my coach. First and foremost, you have to go follow John Romanello, which I will link all of this stuff up in the show notes. So feel free to go follow the links there. Follow him. It's more about his stories. So you might want to just turn on your notifications because they're pretty good. You can go in and ask questions. He does a really great job of getting back to people and giving really great feedback and answers. There's also another person on Instagram, Dr. Zana. She's the relationship scientist, world-renowned non-monogamy expert. So there are two accounts that I follow that I find really useful and helpful when navigating these things. A lot of the podcasts I'm going to mention, they also have Instagrams as well, which I will link them up to. But podcasts that I've been spending time listening to often are Multi-Amory. They also have a Patreon for more in-depth content. So you can subscribe to their Patreon, and they have a lot of other resources and tools that they offer for you to navigate things like open relationship, non-monogamy, polyamory. And then there is another one. I'm hoping to get these girls on my podcast. So if you know them or like somebody who knows them, can you give them a gentle, loving nudge? Because they're fucking hilarious. And I think that would be the most fun podcast ever. It's double teamed and they're twins and they're just a fucking hoot. So they talk about a lot of sexual things. Their Instagram is also hilarious too. Just because I feel like they would be my friends. Like if we were like somewhere, we would be talking about the same shit. And so I just love when I vibe with people like that. And then we have my trusty dusty favorite, which is Sex with Emily. Also, if you know Emily, but I know that's probably a hard ask. I would love to have her on the podcast. Such great information, very educational, lots of topics around like sex and not even just open relationships and non-monogamy, but lots and lots of questions that people are afraid to ask or just don't know who to ask. She goes over all that. It's great. And then there's also two other great ones, the Open Late podcast and the Shameless Sex podcast, which I'm actually going to have those girls on. I'm very excited about that. So some book recommendations, two that I've really loved, I'm going to share with you is the first one is The Ethical Slut. I feel like that was my favorite book. Probably my favorite book, one of my top favorite books of all time was The Ethical Slut. And I highly encourage you as a woman, whether you're monogamous or non-monogamous, to just read that just for sheer paradigm shift and really to just wrap your head around something completely different and it's going to fucking blow your mind. Okay. Then More Than Two. I just finished that one. It's a practical guide to ethical polyamory. Really great resource to walk you through everything. I feel like it's kind of like the poly Bible and open relationship Bible. There's so many different scenarios they give you, stories from people who have contributed that they, obviously they know or they've interviewed. And it feels very much like a Bible or like a dictionary. So yeah, encyclopedia probably more though. But then we have a couple other ones. Opening Up is one, Polysecure, Attachment, Trauma, and Consensual Non-Monogamy. So we have quite a few. And then the next one that I'm actually going to dive into is called Designer Relationships. So there are some resources there for you. There's also a whole host of YouTube videos on lots of different open relationship and polyamorous topics. Okay, moving on. The second tip is therapy and support. Now, embarking in this new kind of realm of my life that is now going to become part of, I guess, my identity, right? Is how to navigate myself now in the world and how to untangle some old programming that I know comes up for me in conversations with monogamy for myself, because I'm not going to associate myself as really being a monogamous person anymore. So therapy and support are super helpful. So many of you know one of my best friends is a therapist. So I'm in communication with her basically every single day. And I have my own therapist. And then I work with John as my communication coach, and he's helping me tremendously in this process. But it's important with therapy to figure out why you do the things you do. Why do I do the things I do? Why do I behave the way that I do? Why do I keep repeating the same pattern, the same habit, these same mistakes in relationships, self-sabotages, all the little things that you need to get out of your head and allow somebody to help you understand and untangle the ball of yarn is what I call it. That's how I describe going to therapy is when I have an appointment with my therapist, I'm like, okay, my brain feels like scrambled eggs or a ball of yarn and it's all tangled up in there. And I'm just going to keep ruminating on that until it's just a bigger mess. So it's nice to have somebody who is a non-biased person, right? You're like, oh, well, I have a great friend that listens to me. Well, your friend is probably biased or a family member. It's great to have a third party who who does not have any kind of emotional attachment to you other than the capacity for empathy of you being a human being, correct, right? And you can lay these things out on the line for them. That has been very, very helpful for me. I've been partaking in some form of therapy for probably at least the last 6 years. We did marital therapy as well too, but it's a very great resource. And the old stigma of like, oh, if go to therapy, something's wrong with you. That's bullshit. Okay. Like no one's perfect and you should not be able to figure everything out on your own. Okay. The other thing is the support. So support's great, right? I have a group of friends. They all know what's going on with me. They listen to me. They will give me some great feedback. But I also have reached out to John and have hired him to give me some more direct work than something like therapy offers. So he's more of like holds me accountable. He's going to tell me what to change and how to change it when and like how to navigate that in communication, right? So our sessions are very much like checking in. How are things since the last time we met? What are some things that have come up for you? What are you struggling with? And that's where I'm like, this, and this is going on. I know I need help with this specific thing because I want to have a conversation and I don't know how. And he helps me like make the words come out pretty and not hurt people's feelings because I'm a volcano. I know, I'm sure that's shocking. I'm not a volcano. Correction. I used to be in a volcano. And when I would just take care of things myself, or I'd be upset about things, or just would let things sweep under the rug for years, 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 and years. And then all of a sudden, like somebody would sneeze at me wrong, and it would just like all come out like a volcano. But I'm not. We're working on that. We're not doing that anymore. So it's super, super helpful. Now, some other ways that you can find support groups is things like they still do things like meetups, Facebook. Facebook has groups. So there's poly groups that you can look for and become a part of. And I feel like when you are starting something so very controversial still, unfortunately, like this, and you want to navigate it openly, and like a huge piece of this for me is the trust and honesty component. And that's why I was like, I need to kind of get this off my chest because people are probably like, what the fuck is she doing? Like, she's going on all of these dates and this and this and that. And like, granted, there should be no judgment on what I do with my personal life. I just like to live in integrity and authenticity. And so it's like, I want to be able to just speak about those things. And if you don't have the support, like I took the expedited version, poly groups could probably help immensely with navigating really interesting conversations that you maybe don't anticipate yourself getting into or couldn't even imagine getting into. So check online for that. Obviously, if you find somebody maybe on Instagram, you can find different recommendations from friends to acquaintances maybe who maybe and also something that's really important too that I wanted to disclose is interviewing your therapist is also okay, and like getting inquisitive with things, because therapists that are experienced in working with like non-monogamous clients or poly couples are going to probably be an easier match for you to like resonate with as far as a therapist, because they'll have an understanding of the challenges that are presented with that navigating that lifestyle. So other things is like attending poly meetups, which I talked about meetups. That's still a thing. Even things like kink events. I know that's kind of, that's kind of getting out there, but you're going to be around some pretty sexually open-minded people, and you might find some other folks that are poly there. But back to the therapist stuff, I think it's important that you find a therapist that's a good match. So if you have a session with somebody and it's just not a good fit after you've, essentially vetted them out, it's okay to be like, I gotta break up with you and like move on. Okay, tip number 3, you got to take this slow and steady. So I am, I guess I would call myself a solo poly person. And for a solo poly person, the way that I associate that, and by like the definition of what I've read and things like that, I'm like, yeah, that pretty much sounds like me, is like, I am very independent. I value my independence. I prefer my independence in the sense that like I like to make my own financial decisions. I want to live by myself. Like I know that, even with a current relationship that I'm navigating right now, and I'm have deep feelings for this man and love feelings, I'm like, I still would want to live by myself. I just know that. So I qualify, I guess, as a solo poly person. I just know that to my depth of my core, if I haven't already said that. So I like to I prioritize my own needs and my own desires, and I know what I want, and I'm very content with sharing that with my partners, and I'm very open sexually and very highly sexual. And I'm okay with communicating this to like any potential partners so they know where I'm coming from. So that has to be something that if you choose, like if you resonate with that, we're like, yeah, me too. I like to just be, independent woman, but I want to like a partner who's going to be like, I'm committed to, but just don't get too close to me. I'm just kidding. I'm saying in household proximity, but you'd want to take things slow and steady and make sure that you're very, very clear about that. I think it's important if you see the potential in someone to be that person for you, that you're very, very clear on this relationship style, because that might look very different for someone else. And you want to establish that very early on. They may be looking for a serious live-in partner, and they might have different needs. And so there's got to be some level of establishing that very early because, feelings and shit. So take your time, get to know each other. It's really just like any other relationship, but especially with a non-monogamous one, it's very important to take the time to get to know each other, because you have to build a high fucking level of trust before you dive into anything, especially something like poly or open, too quickly, because everybody needs to feel secure. Like you need to feel secure in the choices you're making with the person you have chosen, and vice versa. And if you're not, there's going to be a lot of mismatch there. Okay, the other thing with being solo poly and communicating that to a potential partner, right? So for example, I'm in this situation now. I've been dating a gentleman for a couple months now. For me, that's a long time. Okay, let's just be real. A couple months consistently, lots of communication over the phone, planning trips together and things of whatnot. And I definitely have love feelings developing for this person. But it's very important as I'm doing that, and I'm a solo poly person. He is very much a classically monogamous person, but he's also very aware that this is my lifestyle choice. But communicating openly and honestly is a paramount. So I cannot begin to tell you how much you'll be talking. Okay. Like you're going to be talking a fucking lot if you decide that this is what you want to do with your life. Otherwise, you're going to just have problem after problem after problem. And I don't know about you, but I ain't got the time for that. So I'm communicating very openly. I'm like, just so we're clear, like I'm enjoying to get to know you. I love spending time with you. And I'm also still being intimate with other people. That was a recent discussion I had like last week. So it's constantly checking in, being open, discussing boundaries. This is like another level of conversation that I'm going to be exploring next with my partner, is like, what are our boundaries? What are your expectations? How are you feeling about this? Like what level of disclosure do you want to know? Do you want to know really fine details, because that could be fun? Or do you just want to like have a heads up? So you need to come to a like collaborative type of boundary that works for both of you, that you both feel comfortable with. So that's super important. Boundaries are by far something that you need to just lay out on the table for future issues to be less prominent. It's so important. The other thing is if you set boundaries, you need to respect them. So it's one thing for your partner to set a boundary and then you disrespect them. It's respecting them and making sure that you're both on the same page with understanding what they mean. And also those will change. They will evolve, right? It could start off with one specific boundary and then it changes to another, but this is going to help you build trust with each other and prevent anybody from getting frustrated, feeling overwhelmed, or pressured. It's really just communicating what you want and what you don't want to happen in this relationship and how it's evolving. And know that you're going to likely revise it, revisit it, because the relationship will also change. You will change as a person. Your partner will change as a person. It would only make sense that as you evolve and change and have different experiences with different people, potentially other partners and other relationships, if you go more the poly route, that boundaries are going to have to be revisited and communicated. So that's why I'm saying, like, this takes a lot of communication, but it's a good thing, and I love it. I'm here for it. I'm excited for it. It's scary, but I'm also here for it. Okay, so just to wrap that up, just communication super openly and honestly is going to be your best bet with respecting each other's boundaries. It'll allow you to just create that foundation so you can explore non-monogamy together, but also being a solo poly individual, which can pose a challenge. It can pose some insecurities with partners, not being live-in partners and also having other relationships and things. So we're going to talk more about how you can settle into a more committed open relationship in just a second. But to wrap that up, when you're in this slow and steady pace, which was tip number 3, do not forget to take things slow, prioritize your needs and desires, but you're also being very mindful and respectful of your partner and also their needs. And that's when you can just sit openly with a person you have deep love and care for and empathy for, and know that you want this to be beneficial for the both of you, right? You want this to be a wonderful experience, your relationship to grow and thrive and build off of it, while you're also feeding your own needs and desires apart from each other. Okay, now on the flip side of that coin, when you are in a current relationship, I'm going to touch on the importance of taking things slow and steady, which are going to mirror a lot of the things when you're a solo person or a single person going into a non-monogamous chapter or segue into your life. When you are in a committed relationship, let's say you have a partner, you're married, or a deeply committed relationship, and you want to open up the relationship to non-monogamy, you have to do the same thing, slow and steady, for so many reasons. First of all, there's a major shift in how the dynamics of your initial agreement, right? Whatever your initial agreement, if that's your marriage, if that was maybe a commitment ceremony or just a commitment that you have to each other as monogamous, exclusive partners, it's going to shift that. So it's going to bring up, and even in solo poly, like doing this as a single person and trying to establish new committed relationships, it can bring up a lot of like insecurity, jealousy, fear. So it's important to give yourself time to adjust. Like there's an adjustment period. You can't just like be like, yeah, we're going to be fine with it, we're not jealous. And then, something so simple can happen. And I'm going to share with you something that happened with me where I'm like, holy shit, I don't like that. I don't like that feeling, right? I'm jealous. Like that's weird. And I don't like that. So it can bring on a lot of unnecessary conflict. It also will basically do the same things as being a single person trying to navigate in a non-monogamous relationships. Is if you move slow, steady, it's going to allow for you to be clear with your communication, very clear. State what you need, state what you want, and communicate about that, negotiate, find boundaries, things like that. Whatever expectations you have, also you need to communicate those. It's so important that you keep clear, honest communication. If you take nothing away from this, just take away the communication piece of this. This includes like everything that you are comfortable and not comfortable with. You need to communicate that with your partner. Even navigating me, like as a single poly or solo poly, as I'm going into this potential relationship with somebody, I want to be very clear as we move towards that. Like, I want you to be my boyfriend. Will you be my boyfriend? And in this process, let's discuss what that looks like. Our like outside of our relationship, I know talking about what you're comfortable with is going to be super important. Is this are you open to dating other people? Are you open to having other boyfriends? Are you open to group activities, group sex activities? Is it just there might be some things that you discuss around the intimacy piece of it. Like, I know some couples that are like, we one of our boundaries is we don't have my wife doesn't have period sex with anyone else. Like, it's an intimate thing for them, and that's not something he wants her to share with anyone else. That's like a boundary. Another one could be an old school one is like, if you do something like a swingers swap or something like that, it's like no kissing. There's like some things like that. I will tell you that the more stringent you get and try to place boundaries on physical limitations in sexual capacity with open relationship, you're likely coming up against more challenge, just at least in my experience and from what I've read so far. So there's different ways that you can go about it. So it's like having these conversations. What does that look like? Does it look like we try starting things like, doing swinger stuff where we do a full swap? Is it you're on a dating app and I'm on a dating app and we disclose that to each other? Like, oh, like help me pick my date. Like, do we want to go down that route? That would probably be me. Like, that would be me. I'd be like, hey, let's pull up my Bumble and I'll pull up yours or whatever. And like, I want to see what girls are like looking at you or whatever. And I would want to be like, yeah, I want you to hook up with her. Like, if this is like Tinder or something, right? Or Bumble. There's so much hookup stuff going on Bumble too, by the way, PS. So it's like you can kind of make it what you want it to be, but everybody needs to be on the same fucking page. Okay. You really need to be on the same page, because if you're on page 10 on chapter 1 and he's on like chapter 12, page 900 or something, I don't know, it's a fucking Bible, but you're going to have a massive disconnect, and so much shit can fucking pop off. Like, things that you're not talking about are going to be an issue, because you're going to be like, oh, well, we didn't discuss that. We didn't talk about that. When in doubt, ask your partner. When in doubt, when you're like, I don't know if she'd care, she probably wouldn't care, fucking ask her. Okay. Same thing. Oh, he'd be fine with it. Nope. Just make sure. Okay, boo boo. He might have some kind of little weird to you thing where that might bother him, and you don't know because you are not him, or you don't know because you are not her. And so it's best to just talk about that stuff. What do you need to know? What boundaries are in place? The other thing is how are you going to check in with each other along the way? So something that I took away from one of my readings was that there's a couple that checks in every week. They just have like a weekly check-in. It's like a roundup of the week, like on Thursday or Friday. Okay, so how'd your week go? And this is for partners that weren't live-in partners, I believe. How'd your week go? Are you planning any dates coming up? How was your date with so-and-so? Kind of revisiting if they haven't talked about it at point of, because some couples are pretty casual about it. And then you have some couples that want to have full discussions, about each interaction and the depths and the just all of the intricacies that go on with that. And they have like high levels of disclosure. So you really have to decide what works for you as a team, as a couple. And remember that you're a couple and a team and partners for a reason. You want to work together to make an experience for the both of you that makes sense, so that you're both content in that relationship. So all of the other basic rules apply. It's going slow and steady is going to help you build trust. Of course, trust is essential with any relationship, but definitely with non-monogamy, especially exploring like new experiences. I mean, that's in and of itself, outside of your primary relationship, is nerve-wracking. So trust with your partner is going to be imperative, but also is going to be built by way of having these conversations. When you can build that foundation, and that mutual respect towards each other, where you really have each other's back and you're like, no, I just want you to be informed. And I want you, to make sure, like, I love you. I'm here for you. How are you feeling with that? Checking in, that your relationship is just going to get stronger and it's going to build and grow. Another tip I have for you is, when you're in this process, if you are in a relationship and you open up the relationship, and even if you're not, if you're solo poly like me, is regularly checking in with yourself and your partners just to make sure that everybody's like happy, everyone's comfortable, respected, everyone's getting enough of attention, and not rushing into things, because it can make it very difficult for you to just like take a step back and realize like, okay, I'm overwhelmed, I'm burnt out, there's too many things going on, so just going slow and really checking in with yourself quite frequently. Like I do this often. I journal usually now at this rate because I have so many rapid changes going on in my life. I feel like just in my personal relationships, I'm journaling at least 3 nights a week, which is a little heavier for me. It used to be like once a week, but it helps you just take some time to like reflect and brain dump. And the more the better, in my opinion. If you've heard me talk about journaling and the importance of journaling with glitter. Okay, moving on. Number 4, honest communication. Now, I have been very scared and I feared rejection big time, like I mentioned earlier, with a situationship that I have been in, because I didn't want to scare him away. I was like, oh, he's going to be weirded out by this thing where I'm like, nope, I'm going to have fun dating you, but I would only like seriously date you if you were interested in being non-monogamous. And it, essentially it backfired. So what I learned from that is, hi, Diane, don't wait like until you're like fucking somebody for 2 months, like 5 times a week, before you decide to be like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm also fucking other people. And, I'm going to be wanting to fuck other people. So with my next relationship, situationship that I really enjoyed this person, I was upfront day one. Day one. I'm like, I'm not putting myself through that again. Okay. And so I was very upfront and I'm honest. And he was like, thank you for being honest. I don't know a whole lot about it, but like, I'm excited to get to know you, and like, let's take it from here. And so we've been communicating about it. I have been talking to him for a couple months. He knows I went to a play party of which he was not there. And so it's part of who I am, and I'm talking about it early. It's helping me build trust. It's hopefully, with being honest and upfront, it's going to help you prevent any kind of misunderstanding and also work around jealousy. I don't want to say that's going to prevent jealousy, because jealousy is going to happen. And I think at some point it improves, and maybe it goes away for people who've been doing this for quite some time, but that's going to take some recalibrating for a lot of us. It's a normal reaction. It also encourages consent. So when you are in non-monogamous relationships, it's so important for you to have boundaries and agreements around what's okay, what's not okay, what level of disclosure your partner might want ahead of time before you partake, or if you start talking to somebody. You want just everybody to have full consent on anything in any relationships that could be changing the dynamic of the one that you already have with your partner. This also helps allow for some problem solving. So when some issues are coming up in your non-monogamous relationship, obviously it's important to talk about them openly and honestly, but it's going to allow problem solving and finding solutions that work for everyone involved. Taking your considerations, your partner's considerations, and then if you have outside partners of that as well. And then also, lastly, it's going to help promote emotional intimacy. So emotional intimacy, the more that you can talk, I will tell you right now, the conversations that I've had with my current partner, and a lot of them have been around this, and just really just diving into like how we both think and making sure that we're sound. Like I can have conversations with him and I know it's not going to backfire, and vice versa. It has built a really deep level of emotional intimacy that's moved very quickly because there's been a lot of communication versus a relationship in which I have maybe had triple the amount of time and like a quarter of the communication. So super different, very, very great, change in my behaviors for sure. So one thing you can do is talk with your partner using active listening skills, using things like I statements. One thing that I would suggest is if you want to talk to your partner about something, like I'm doing this continually as I'm coming up against different things, or maybe you want to have a conversation with your husband or your partner, maybe about opening up, or just in general, take fucking notes. I open up my notes in my phone and I start taking notes. And then when it comes time to have the conversation, I'm not like, shit, I don't want to forget about that thing I wanted to say, or that point I wanted to make, or that thing I'm feeling insecure about, or whatever. And then when it comes to have the conversation, you want no distractions, but you want to say like, hey, I took some notes because this conversation is important for me. So if I'm looking at my phone, just know like I'm with you. I need to reference it. I've done that multiple times. So some examples of active listening is like, hey, I hear that you're nervous about me going on a date. Is that right? And then you can start with that conversation, not like, oh, well, it sounds like you're jealous, start with I statements, kind of like building in that container where they feel safe to have conversations with you. So when I discuss my own thoughts and feelings, I say, I use I statements instead of you statements, instead of saying like, well, you made me feel like shit. It's like, I felt like shit when I saw that girl on you. Okay, that was literally a conversation that we had. So I don't put blame. I'm just like, hey, this is how I felt and this was my experience. Like, what did you experience? And like, let's talk about that. One example kind of in the same realm is like, I feel a little insecure when you're talking about your other partner, right? So like if you're in an open relationship, your partner is likely going to have another partner. If it's a polyamorous relationship, could be another boyfriend or girlfriend. And you might notice something comes up for you. And that's a great thing to just have a conversation around calmly and just being open and vulnerable so you can work through it together. So checking in regularly also helps with this. So everyone's on the same page and you can address like any kinds of like weird issues or tensions before they come up and, make some requests if you need to, just to feel at ease with your partner, maybe spending some time with another partner or leaving, or you're going to be by yourself. So having these conversations and talking about things and how they're going. So that way you can just get them all on the table. The other thing is being respectful and patient. It can require I've been talking about here, tons of communication and patience. So take it slow and just, an example is just like, hey, I know this is tough to talk about, but I appreciate your openness, your honesty, like willing to work with me. Let's take this slow and just, we're going to make sure we're comfortable every step of the way. Like that's a conversation that I'm having with my partner, right? Like I know this is a lot and, I care about you. And I also want to make sure that we're like in this together and we're having conversations so we can address things because you're important to me. So communication is super important. I statements, active listening, don't have your phone out unless you're looking at your notes, that kind of thing. All right. Last but not least, boundaries and agreements. So the boundaries and agreements things I've touched on quite a bit already, but with boundary setting, this is going to help you again establish trust. It's a foundation for you guys to know like where are our perimeters here? Like what are we moving around? What are we navigating together? And what is something that is a hard no for you and a hard no for me? And let's work through that so we know that we're on the same page of the same book and the same chapter, right? So one example is you guys might agree to always use protection with other partners or to always check in with the other partner before you pursue another relationship, right? Like for me, for example, one of our boundaries might be with me and my current partner is like, okay, so you and I are dating, we're committed to each other. I would love to call you my boyfriend. And also I'm on dating apps still, I expect that you're on dating apps. And one of our boundaries is, if you're going to go out with somebody, just let me know. Like, hey, I have a date on Friday. I just wanted to give you a heads up. Great. Cool. Let's talk about it. How much do you want to know? How much do you not want to know? And it's not about the other person not being enough for you. It's not that, they're not good enough for you, because that comes up a lot too. And I feel like that might be a natural reaction. It's having an experience and a different experience with somebody else. It's like I have 4 very best friends. No, my experience with each one of them individually is not like the other. And when we all hang out together, it's great and it's fine and we have a fantastic time. But I love them all very differently for very different reasons. And there's nothing about any of them that makes the other one less special. Okay. And when you can adapt that with your relationships and something like open relationships, and also know that about yourself, like if your partner is out on a date with somebody, it's not because you're not enough. It's because that we have the capacity to have emotions and feelings for more than one person. So that's at least just my opinion. Okay. Maintaining emotional and physical safety. So some other boundaries and agreements you might have are setting boundaries around not having sex with other partners in like your bed at home. right? So that might be an emotional thing for somebody, right? Like emotional safety for you is like, yo, I don't care who you fuck, but please just not fuck in my bed. Okay. That's probably how I would say it. If you guys are partnered and living together, it's just letting you have that piece of the relationship that maybe is meaningful to you. And that's important. And even if your partner doesn't understand that, that's something you guys communicate together and work around. Oh, another important boundary is communicating your needs and desires. So, deciding how often you want to spend time with with your partner. How many nights a week are you allowing for date nights with new people? Are you allowing sleepover situations at your house, at their house? There's a lot of different things that this could eventually develop into if you move more towards like the poly route. And setting boundaries around time is probably one of the more challenging things because there isn't much time to go around these days. And so, really making sure that you have the mental bandwidth. At one time, I was seeing 4 different men a week, and it was just like, I could not do that. It was very, very short lived. I had 4 boyfriends, not really, but it was on average 4 men a week, different men. And it was a lot to manage. And now that I've found somebody, I wouldn't want to allocate that much time to spending outside of my relationship that I'm trying to develop. And that's like an early boundary that I want to set right now is like, I like you. I want to continue to get to know you. And I'm going to leave some free time on my schedule also to meet other people. But I want to allocate some boundaries around our time together, how much we text each other, what's an appropriate amount of calling and, connecting and date nights and things like that. And it sounds like you're like, wow, this sounds really fucking planned. Or where's the spontaneity? Sometimes it'd be like that. And honestly, it leaves less room for error and more time for looking forward to specific time with your partner and knowing that it is set up for you to have date nights or do fun shit together, sit on the couch and watch Netflix and eat ice cream, whatever it is. But you have that boundary around your time. Another fun boundary to consider, since we're on the topic of boundaries, is deciding when I was talking about like boundaries around communication is boundaries around how like you're going to communicate with your partner when you're on a date with somebody else. Like, what does that look like? Are you checking in, as you get on the date? Is it midway through? Is it after? Do you want a phone call? And just getting very clear on what that looks like. So there's no misunderstandings. Nobody, everybody's needs are met and everybody's on the same page and being open and honest. And, that this is another way that trust is built. I just feel like with this style relationship for me, I don't feel like I have to lie about anything. And I used to live a life of like when I was married and in relationships where I was infidelitous, there was so much lying and I was like living a double life. And that is not fun. It's exhausting. So for me, this feels very authentic to me to live my life like this and be open and sharing and not feel like I can't be honest with my partner if for some reason our relationship didn't work out in spite of all the other things that we had going on, whether I'm dating people or he's dating people. And I just know that like the relationship itself isn't a good match and not necessarily like, oh, somebody else wooed me away. Like I'm in a position where I feel open and authentic enough to be able to express that and not be sitting in a relationship that isn't for me for way too long. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, you guys, that was a lot. And hopefully some of this landed for you in a positive way. But I would love to know what you thought. Just to wrap this up with a pretty little bow, this is not easy. I do not have all the answers. This is just the basics in which I've learned so far, things that I'm exploring, experiences that I've had, mistakes that I've made, some successes that I've had. And I feel like this is the first time in my life, and I'll be 45 here in just a few short weeks, that I have felt the most at ease in my romantic relationships, in like who I am as a woman and like what I bring to the world in terms of like, if people are want to judge me for the way that I live my personal life, like they're just not my people, and that's a hard thing to sometimes grasp. And I feel like no matter who you are, the sooner that you grasp on that, the less you feel bogged down by other people's bullshit and their opinions. So anyways, okay, just to round it out, getting started with non-monogamy. Do your freaking research. I'm going to link up everybody in the show notes. Invest in some therapy or some coaching or some support of some kind, right? Facebook, meetups, poly groups. Number 3, slow and steady. Take your time. Get to know each other, communicate, respect each other, look at boundaries, and work through that stuff little by little. It's not going to be a knocking out the ballpark. There's going to be a lot of conversation, which leads to number 4, honest communication. Being honest, be authentic, be real, be vulnerable. That builds trust, that builds intimacy, that helps your partner get closer to you in ways that are going to be easier for you to navigate non-monogamy, right? The more that you can communicate and have the difficult conversations, right? Take notes, reference them in conversations. Then last but not least is setting your boundaries and making agreements. Set those boundaries, decide what they are together, honor those boundaries, communicate them, and collaborate, right? It's not like my way or the highway. Like, really figure out what works for the both of you and talk openly about it. And if something doesn't work for you, say it, speak it, and put it into the universe. Let the chips fall where they may and work them out together. All right. So thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode. I encourage you, and this will help me be more vulnerable. I encourage you to share your stories with me in my DMs over on Instagram. In fact, if you feel compelled, I would really gratefully ask for you to do that. Love notes are my words of affirmation, are love notes, and it really keeps me going with the podcast. But I would love to know how this landed for you. If you aren't my friend yet on Instagram, it's Diane Flores _IFBB_pro. Go find me there. And if you have any questions about non-monogamy or open relationships or dating or hookups or kinky stuff, any of that fun stuff, sexual things that you're like, oh, I really want to know this, but I don't know. I'm kind of like, who am I going to ask? You don't want to go to the Google. Use me as your Google. I don't know. I'll help you figure it out. We'll figure it out together. So that's all I have for you guys. Good luck in your sexy journeys. And I will see you on the next Boss Bitch After Dark. Boss Bitch. Thank you for listening to Boss Bitch Radio. It would mean the world to me if you could rate and review the podcast. If you could give us a 5-star review on iTunes, drop us a little comment. We will read those, and we offer prizes as a ethical bribe for you to leave us some great mojo and words of affirmation. That is my love language. And also, if you're over on Spotify, you can rate and review it there as well. All of this helps other women, other people, other folks see us, hear us, and learn from all of the amazing Boss Bitch tools and hacks, and hopefully get some LOLs. And if not, if anything, if you could share this with one person, I'd love you forever. And I know you are just here for my undying love. And last but not least, please, 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 please come find me over on Instagram so we can be buddies. We can be Insta fam over there. I am Diane Flores _IFBB_pro. Come say hi, drop me a DM, let me know what you think of the podcast. I'm always open for new suggestions and feedback as well. And I hope you listen again soon.